U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi meets with Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen and promises the U.S. will not abandon its commitment to Taiwan. She is now in South Korea to meet with the country's parliamentary leaders on Thursday. Seoul's Foreign Minister Park Jin is on a trip to Cambodia to attend a series of ASEAN-related events. He starts off by explaining the ASEAN policies of the new Yoon administration at the foreign ministers' meeting. South Korea confirms around 104,000 new cases of COVID-19 as of 9 p.m. Wednesday. While the doubling effect has stopped, the upward trend continues.
Good morning, welcome to New Day at Arirang. We begin with the unannounced yet highly anticipated visit to Taiwan by US Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi and her fellow delegates on their Indo-Pacific trip. Speaker Pelosi and her colleagues met with the Taiwanese president and reaffirmed the US's commitment to the island, emphasizing solidarity.
All this amid China's military operations in waters around Taiwan. And the military exercises, according to Chinese state-run media, are set to continue into the weekend despite Pelosi having left the island already. Our Peunji starts us off.
U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi arrived in Taiwan late on Tuesday, making her the highest-ranking U.S. official in a quarter of a century to visit the self-ruled island, which is claimed by China. During her meeting with the Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen, Pelosi said her trip is to make unequivocally clear that the U.S. will not abandon its commitment to Taiwan.
And now more than ever, America's solidarity with Taiwan is crucial, and that is the message we are bringing here today.
In response, the Taiwanese president said Taiwan will not back down despite escalating military threats.
At the same time, we also hope to unite and cooperate with democratic countries around the world to jointly protect our democratic values.
Earlier in the day, Pelosi visited the Taiwanese parliament, where she praised Taiwan as one of the free societies in the world.
We want to increase interparliamentary cooperation and dialogue. And we do so at a time when our president has put forth an Asian-Pacific initiative which we support, and we want to be specific in terms of how we work with Taiwan in that regard.
Pelosi's visit to Taiwan garnered much global attention as well as immediate strong reaction from Beijing. China launched a series of joint military operations in waters around Taiwan starting Tuesday night. Chinese state media posted a map on Twitter showing 6 areas around Taiwan, where it said the military would hold drills from Thursday through Sunday. However, the Biden administration was keen to cool tensions with China over Pelosi's visit. A White House National Security Council spokesperson noted that it was Pelosi's right to visit Taiwan, but also stressed that the trip did not violate Chinese sovereignty.
There's no reason, as I said yesterday, for Beijing to turn this visit, which is consistent with long-standing U.S. policy, into some sort of crisis, or use it as a pretext to increase aggressiveness and military activity in or around the Taiwan Strait, now or beyond her travel.
Peunji, Arirang News.
With Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, countries in the region are feeling the growing tension between the US and China. So where does Seoul's diplomacy go from here? Han Song will interview some experts to provide a deeper analysis.
Caught in limbo. U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan presents South Korea a unique geopolitical challenge, staying as neutral as it can, delicately balancing its ironclad alliance with the United States and the strategic cooperative partnership it shares with China, its largest trading partner.
She'll come to Seoul, and probably Taiwan and China will be the top for the whole agenda for her visit to Seoul. So it will be dominant, and my guess is it will be linked to conditions that South Korea join, both for weapon systems, for intelligence sharing programs that are being extended, for cooperation in U.S. Personally, I think it's an extremely dangerous game to play.
President of the Asia Institute think tank, Emmanuel Pastreich, believes South Korea must be prudent in how it acts moving forward. But at a certain point, needs to act as an intermediary between the US and China towards building peace and stability in East Asia. This is a point Professor of Chinese Studies Chu Jae-woo agrees with.
South Korea needs to stand tall and above pro-China or pro-United States because South Korean incumbent government has already declared that its foreign policy line is to become a global pivotal state, which means we have to be more concerned about the global affairs and global situation. These global situations we are confronting today is very much deeply involved with human rights situations and territorial sovereignty principles and so forth.
But there are those who point out that Pelosi's Taiwan trip was more symbolic in nature, that South Korea's relationship with both the United States and China will largely remain intact regardless. International relations expert Joe Phillips says China may have overreacted to the event with specific intentions in mind.
A case where Xi needed to make a big stand because of the upcoming party Congress where he's seeking to become to get reelected and essentially to become leader for life in China. And so he wanted to make and he needed to make a big show of Chinese nationalism and standing up to the U.S.
As for Seoul's response to Nancy Pelosi's Asia tour, an official from the presidential office said Wednesday that the country welcomes the House Speaker's trip to South Korea and hopes to maintain close communication with the nations concerned on all issues regarding Taiwan through dialogue and cooperation for peace and stability in the region. 한성우, Arirang News.
South Korean National Assembly Speaker Jin-pyo is set to meet US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi at Parliament at 11:50 a.m. Thursday. According to the Speaker's office, the two will hold talks for 50 minutes to discuss a variety of topics including regional security, economic partnership and climate change. Also in attendance will be the floor leaders of the ruling People Power Party and the opposition Democratic Party, as well as members of the Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee. Pelosi's delegation includes House Foreign Affairs Committee Chair Gregory Meeks, House Veterans Affairs Committee Chair Mark Takano, and Korean-American Congressman Andy Kim. The talks will be followed by a short joint briefing and a luncheon at the National Assembly. Pelosi is then expected to head to the Inter-Korean Border Joint Security Area with all eyes on a potential message for North Korea. Her trip marks the first visit by a US House Speaker to Seoul in 20 years.
Seoul's top diplomat is on a trip to Cambodia to attend a series of ASEAN-related events. Park Jin officially begins his Phnom Penh schedule on Thursday by explaining the ASEAN policies of the Yoon administration at the foreign ministers' meeting. At the ASEAN Plus 3 meeting, which also involves South Korea, China, and Japan, discussions will center on post-pandemic era economic cooperation. Following their meetup, Park could sit down with his Japanese counterpart to keep talks going on improving bilateral ties. Officials from the US, China, Russia, and other world powers will all be at the ARF, marking their positions clear on regional issues such as North Korea's nuclear ambitions as well as the crises in Myanmar and Ukraine. At the only multilateral security forum North Korea participates, the regime will likely claim its military activities are solely for self-defense, while Park Jin will once again clarify Seoul is pushing Pyongyang's complete denuclearization. Top military officers of Seoul and Washington agreed on the timely deployment of U.S. strategic assets on the peninsula in case North Korea conducts a nuke test. The chairman of South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff and his American counterpart held virtual talks on Wednesday. They decided a strong joint response would be issued in the event of a 7th North Korean nuclear test. They also agreed to strengthen the allies' combined defense posture through Ulchi Shield drill, scheduled for late August, that will include field training. With its chairman suspended, the People Power Party will hold meetings to determine if the current vacuum constitutes an emergency. If an interim leader is appointed, Lee Jun-seok will automatically lose his post. Lee Kyung-un explains further.
South Korea's ruling People Power Party is gearing up to launch its emergency leadership in the following week, which will effectively replace the currently suspended chairman Lee Jun-seok. According to the party's National Committee head Seo Byung-soo on Wednesday, it will be a two-stage process. First, it will convene a standing National Committee on Friday, where two main topics will be on the agenda. One, they'll review whether the current situation, the suspension of Chairman Lee Jun-seok, and the resignations of some Spring Council members can be considered urgent enough to be called a party emergency, which will be required to launch an emergency leadership. Technically, party rules state an emergency means vacancy of chairman and a complete dissolution of Spring Council. Members will also revise party rules to enable an acting chair to appoint emergency leader not only in case of a chairman vacancy but suspension as well. Then they will gather for an upper-level National Committee meeting on Tuesday to approve the revised party rules and to appoint the interim leader. The plan is to launch the new emergency leadership system by Wednesday. Though it's not yet been agreed how long the new leadership will last or who the head will be. But one thing is clear, once the leadership is launched, Chairman Lee Jun-seok will be unable to return to his post.
Once the emergency leadership kicks off, the current leadership gets dissolved automatically. That includes Chairman Lee Jun-seok's post, which is part of that current leadership.
Chairman Lee Jun-seok immediately denounced the decision, saying what the party is situated in should not be seen as an emergency. What needs to be decided before Friday's National Committee meeting is whether the emergency leadership will last for the rest of Chairman Lee's term or a shorter term and prepare for an early national convention to elect a new full-time leadership. Lee Kyung-un, Arirang News.
It's time for Onpoint, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into some of the key issues in the spotlight right now. The Korean Pathfinder lunar orbiter, also known as Danuri in Korean, is set to be launched this Friday from Florida after being delayed from its initial launch date of Wednesday local time. With the help of NASA, the satellite will take 4 months to reach the moon, but once it gets there, it will orbit for a year, providing scientists with very valuable information.
So just how sophisticated is this mission and how far has space technology come for South Korea? For answers, let's connect with An Jae-myung, Associate Professor of Aerospace Engineering at KAIST. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
So first, Apollo 11 is known to have transported human beings to the moon in just 4 days. Why is the KPLO or Danuri taking so long to get to the moon's orbit?
So there are several different trajectory options for lunar missions, such as the direct insertion, phase transfer, and ballistic lunar transfer. The trajectory option used for the Apollo 11 was the direct insertion, which took just 4 days. And between the different trajectory options, we usually have the trade-off between the fuel efficiency and transfer time. That is, a trajectory that consumes less fuel usually takes longer time. And the trajectory used for the Danuri, called as the ballistic lunar transfer, BLT, is an energy efficient one. In BLT, the spacecraft is sent to the vicinity of the Earth's sun L1 point, which is approximately 1.5 million kilometers away from the Earth, and sent back to the moon. So the BLT takes a long time with the lunar transfer, 4.5 months, but however, compared to the direct insertion or phase transfer trajectories, it is known that the BLT can save up to 25% of fuel used to make an orbit at the moon. So the saved fuel can be used to extend the scientific mission period in the lunar orbit.
Professor, well, how significant is this technology to monitor the moon? And are there other countries currently operating a mission similar to KPLO?
So the technology that used for the Danuri are important from the scientific and engineering viewpoint. So one of the main scientific payload of Danuri is the Lunar Terrain Imager, LUTI. It is a high-resolution camera that can take pictures of the lunar surface. The information gathered by LUTI will be used to identify the candidate sites for the future lunar lander missions. Also, the shadow cam developed by the Arizona State University of the United States can explore the permanently shadowed regions of the lunar poles, helping to figure out the presence of the ice deposit on the moon's surface. And there are a couple of the recent orbiter and lander missions that I remember. In 2019, Israel successfully put the Bereshit spacecraft to the lunar orbit, but failed in its landing mission. India also successfully put their Chandrayaan-2 spacecraft to the lunar orbit in 2019, but their lander mission also failed. In 2020, China succeeded in the sample return mission Chang'e-5. The mission returned 1.7 kilogram of the sample from the moon. Very recently, a CubeSat-based lunar mission called Capstone is launched by NASA in late June this year. It also used a ballistic lunar transfer that Danuri is using and will arrive at the moon mid-November, I remember, approximately 1 month before Danuri.
Right, and like you said, other countries have been trying to achieve the success in this type of missions as well. But what about the satellite Danuri? Like, what happens? Because we know that the operation is supposed to be a year long. What happens to the satellite itself after the operation is finished?
Yes, the spacecraft for human mission or the robotic sample return mission returns to the Earth after they complete the operations on the Moon or Mars. But Danuri is an orbiter mission that's not a sample return mission. So after Danuri spacecraft conducts various missions for about 1 year, it does not return to the Earth, unfortunately. Maybe it will continue orbiting around the Moon, and because there's no atmosphere on the Moon, maybe it will stay longer at the Moon orbit.
And well, we know that the launch has been delayed already, but how likely are we to see a liftoff on the updated schedule, and what factors do you think might push the launch further?
Well, the first launch vehicle and Danuri spacecraft should be technologically ready for launch. Even in that situation, we have to consider the weather and other conditions required for the successful launch. The wind, both the surface and the high altitude wind, should not exceed a certain criterion. The probability of the struck by the lightning or the probability of collision with the space debris should be sufficiently low. So as we all know that these conditions are not something that we can control, and I wish that the weather and space debris condition is favorable tomorrow with my fingers crossed.
That's right, and we all have our fingers crossed as well for a successful mission, and we can't wait to hear about what the scientists actually find out from the satellite. So thank you so much for your time, and good morning. Have a good rest of the day.
Yeah, thank you for my pleasure. Thank you.
And that wraps up the first half of New Day at Arirang. But don't go far, because coming up in the second half, we will have a special guest in studio.
That's right. We'll be sitting down with the Republic of Lithuania's Vice Minister of Economy and Innovation to talk about what the future holds for bilateral trade relations between South Korea and Lithuania, as well as where the two countries can help each other out in the area of innovation. So do stay tuned.
Share South Korea's experience in tackling COVID-19 and introduce a Korean new day. A Korean survivor of Japan's wartime slavery met with
extraordinary climate crisis and pledged to work with the EU to tackle the challenge.
The objective of its North Korea policy is
protesters gathering across the country to peacefully demand an end to hate and violence.
Arirang, what matters?
Feel so good right now. Maybe I had a drink or two, but this somehow feels like it's forever. All my friends are here having
Welcome back to New Day at Arirang. South Korea added over 100,000 new COVID-19 cases as of 9 p.m. Wednesday after its total caseload surpassed the 20 million mark the previous day.
There were 104,490 new cases reported, marking a slight drop from the figure announced at the same time the day before. However, it's the third consecutive day where the new infections were above 100,000. Of the new cases, around 49% are concentrated in the Greater Seoul area, and over the past week, the country's average daily new infections stand at around 86,000. A special law aimed at boosting South Korea's semiconductor industry is taking effect starting today. The bill includes measures that will enhance infrastructure, ease key regulations, and train more professional talents. Choi Min-jung reports.
South Korea has newly enforced a special law that could potentially help the country claim dominance in the global semiconductor market. Starting Thursday, the High-Tech Strategic Industries Special Act, also dubbed the Special Act on Semiconductors, takes effect. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy says this will open the door to an innovative environment for growth and boost the industry's competitiveness. The new law is overseen by the Prime Minister and includes various measures to support the local chip industry. First of all, there are more benefits when it comes to the designation of specialized semiconductor complexes. Once a site is designated by the state, the government will provide financial support for power, water, and electricity. Companies are also exempt from conducting preliminary feasibility studies when they are facing time constraints. The act will also help nurture more industry experts. The government will increase the number of specialized graduate schools, provide education programs, and consider increasing the maximum student cap for majors in semiconductors. The final decision as to which companies and schools will be designated for heavy investment will be decided in December or early next year. The industry minister says the government will work more closely with chip makers under the new act as competition between countries intensifies. For example, the U.S. Congress last week passed a package worth more than $50 billion to boost America's domestic supply of chips to counter China. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The world's oil exporting countries have approved only a minimal increase in oil production from next month, despite pressure from the White House to help cool crude prices. Kim Yo-sun has more.
The Organization of the Oil Exporting Countries and its allies, which includes Russia, have agreed to a slight increase in output from September. The group, also known as OPEC Plus, said Wednesday that it would produce an additional 100,000 barrels a day next month amid fears that a global recession will lead to lower demand. This is one of the smallest oil production increases in the group's history. The announcement came after the first OPEC meeting since U.S. President Joe Biden visited Saudi Arabia last month, where he urged the country to pump more oil to help cool prices. For July and August, the group pledged to add over 600,000 barrels a day to the market. Following the announcement, Washington highlighted that it's focused on keeping oil prices down.
But what we're focused on is the bottom line for us is that reducing the price of oil in the market is the most important thing, and that's what we're seeing, and that's what we're going to continue to work on.
OPEC, meanwhile, expressed concerns that global supply will not able to be satisfied after 2023, adding that emergency oil stocks remain at their lowest levels in nearly 3 decades. The group's next meeting is on September 5th. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
It's time for Global Insights, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. Being the birthplace of CRISPR gene editing tools and the most powerful scientific lasers in the world, Lithuania is known for its science and entrepreneurial spirit. As countries around the world face a period of slowing growth, trade disputes and geopolitical conflict, all the more muddled by environmental and health-related challenges, it's becoming increasingly important to find cooperation between borders to find economic security and create innovative solutions. How can South Korea and Lithuania collaborate? Today, we're joined in studio by Jovita Nelipshina, Vice Minister of the Economy and Innovation of the Republic of Lithuania. Now, prior to her current role as Vice Minister, she served as the Chancellor of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador to the EU and Advisor to the President of Lithuania. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, Vice Minister.
Thank you. Good morning.
Yeah, very good morning to you. And well, first of all, it's just wonderful to have you here in Seoul and come down to our office during your very busy stay here. And well, first of all, for our viewers, if you could share with us why you're here this week.
Well, together with the Lithuanian companies, scientists, professors of the CRISPR technology, we are here in the Biotech Plus Interfax conference and exhibition with the Lithuanian stand in there. So presenting our inventions and advanced studies in biotechnology and trying to network with our South Korean partners.
Right, and biotechnology, that's a field that virtually every country in the world is trying to jump into, and obviously Lithuania has a good advantage with its background in innovative technologies. And well, Lithuania, your capital city, is also very well known for its innovative ecosystem, this innovation ecosystem rather. And well, what makes your organic system work, and what do you think is rather unique about it?
I think that one of the reasons is probably priorities. You know, when you want to do everything, then it takes more time and probably more people. When you are a country of 2.8 million, then you have to make a priority. So biotech, smart industry like lasers, and as well IT, ICT is our priorities. So that helps actually to streamline our efforts, streamline the efforts of the government in supporting businesses and researchers, be it fundamental research or applied research, and as well actually to mobilize other kind of the resources within the country. I do believe that this together with the open economy, because we are as the same as Korea, we are exporting economy. More than 80% of our industrial production is actually exported all around the world. Only lasers, for example, are exported to more than 100 countries around the world. So that's actually makes us, you know, to adapt. As a smaller country, we actually are quite flexible. And you know, what is important, the most important is people. And the people has a full of ambitions. So that's probably a good mix for the innovations.
And what's really rather remarkable is that, you know, you have this very agile population in your country, and us being in South Korea, us being trade dependent as well. We're actually, most of the industry is dominated by large conglomerates, but on the other hand, Lithuania, though, it has a very promising and very robust startup system as well. So, but of course, as you said, human resources, they're the most vital ingredient in that mix. So how do you really foster these entrepreneurial mindsets and turn them into industry leaders?
Of course, being not a big economy, we put our emphasis on small and medium businesses. There are big companies, but they are not so big as if we compare with Korean. But we have more than 1,000 startups with really good success rate. Most of them are actually working in IT, ICT, but some of them in biotech as well, and some really very successful in doing business. Their startup community is actually very network open. That means that they have a lot of cooperations with the foreign countries, and definitely foreign capital, because you have to attract the capital, and government is trying to have a financial incentives to make sure that it's not only Lithuanian capital, venture capital helping startups, having national, the governmental supported venture capital, but as well helping them to attract foreign venture capital, which helps them to develop and to accelerate. We have like numerous different kind of the acceleration program. One on which we are working on is actually, maybe it's not surprising for Korea, but in Europe it would be surprising. We're working on the game industry accelerator for the startups, because we are right now are having a huge growth in this field. Good example and success. Just in mid of June, we signed a cooperation with Korean startup organization, and I hope that this will help to develop more links within the startups.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to that synergy. And well, it's been an incredibly challenging time for all countries around the world, all businesses, especially small and medium businesses that are being hit by surging price levels, also soaring debt levels, and all this uncertainty in global trade. So how should small and medium businesses really be supported at this time?
Well, I do believe, one of the things for Lithuanian government is actually to think about not really helping during the crisis, but to prepare the caution before the crisis. That if the company is stable, well organized, healthy in its finances, so that would probably give them the opportunity to survive any kind of the crisis. Well, let's come back, for example, to the peak of COVID. Lithuania was actually probably the only country within the European Union which had no minus in the GDP during the COVID. Our export has been growing because, the supply chain during the COVID and right now because of their geopolitical reasons and Russian war on Ukraine, they were, if not broken, so cracked. So we managed to, our companies, especially small and medium, being flexible enough, managed to fill the gap which was needed, especially in Europe, to shorten the supply chains and to ensure that we are trusted partners and may produce the things which are needed in the market, which led that actually our export has grown during the crisis and still COVID crisis and still has been growing. Another element is that, when you are in a quite difficult neighborhood, let's put nicely, you actually learn the lesson. One of their biggest companies and the most successful startups and one of the unicorns, so more than billion value startup, actually works in cybersecurity. Well, why? Because we know what it means to be under cyber attack for quite a long time. So you learn to live and you do business of what you learn. So there are lots of the third, maybe the last thing is that we have really long-standing cooperation, for example, in Korea in energy and their LNG terminal, offshore LNG ship. Which ensures the energy independence, gas supply independence for not only for Lithuania, but for all the Baltic region, was produced in South Korea. So I do believe that, if you prepare, your slates in summer, that always helps in any kind of the crisis.
Right, I see. And well, with your embassy here in Seoul now, so the Lithuanian embassy in Seoul is quite young, but since you established your embassy here, we've been hearing a lot more about the commercial opportunities and also Lithuanian innovations, of course, and from your commercial attaché. So it's been a good learning process for South Korea. But during your time here, what kind of South Korean innovations stood out to you?
I think that the South Korean wish and ambition to become, for example, vaccine hub, vaccine production hub is really very appealing, I have to say, because we all faced and everyone in the society actually knows what it means and why it is needed. There are some innovations in the cancer detection. This is where we can actually work together, because in some of the cancer detections using Lithuanian lasers, we are quite advanced. Koreans are doing a bit different kind of their research, biomedical part of I think that this is really the things. And but looking in the broader context, Korea for us is best known because the industry you have here, semiconductors, e-vehicles, automotive in general, memory sticks, memory chips. So that's really the amazing part. Everybody right now is everybody's a huge demand, and everybody wants to learn how to build this kind of the industry you can rely on.
Right, and you talked about the industries that we can really build on, and let's talk about energy security again. So going forward, in this time when the entire world really it's facing a severe supply crunch of energy due to geopolitical factors that you mentioned, how can Lithuania and South Korea then cooperate in procuring supplies of energy and really working together at this critical time?
So, of course, one of the things what Europe in general needs is actually independent energy supply, because most of our gas in Europe, not in Lithuania anymore, but most of the European gas was supplied from Russia. Now we have the sanction package, and because of the Russian wage war in Ukraine, we have to think about alternatives. One is, of course, to find alternatives, for the natural gas somewhere in Africa, Arabic Peninsula and other countries, but there are projects like LNG, because I think that everybody now is trying to build the LNG. We could offer our operational capabilities. For example, Lithuanian LNG company in Klaipėda, the seaport town, actually is operating LNG in Brazil. So if you need a good operator for LNG, you can always ask us. But I think that there is another element. So everything what is related to renewables, and a new way of looking at the energy, their solar panels, wind, and offshore wind facilities. This is where we actually can work together.
Right. And what other areas of science and technology do you think Lithuania and South Korea have in which they can cooperate?
Well, we have already mentioned the biotech. We have already good stories. For example, the company which works with the invention of the CRISPR technology, gene editing technology, they have contracts and are in cooperation with NSAGE, Korean company. Celtrion has their links with Lithuanian biomappers. So this is our IoT, the Internet of Things company is actually in the nearest future planning to open their office here and maybe some of their production line, because we're not only attracting investments, which is what is my job, I have to admit, but on the other side, our companies are already investing in foreign countries, and there are some maybe more not usually known areas like space technology, and some of our companies actually already have some links. For example, last year, Lithuanian company Nanoavionics produced small nano satellites for a Korean company Contech. And they're actually launching them together. Hopefully, that would be a kind of a cornerstone for the future broader cooperation. So really there are a wide range of the possibilities, and they're the last but not least, Lithuanian lasers. We produce 10% of the global supply of the short pulse lasers, and 10 of those 10 goes to Korea. So I think that this is the good start.
Right, Vice Minister, as you said, it's incredibly important to have people come together and really collaborate and share ideas that turn into innovation. And in that regard, people-to-people exchanges are so important in academia, in the commercial side as well. So how are you planning to promote that as Vice Minister?
Well, one of the things I have already mentioned, that we already have a success stories where our companies in biotech, in lasers, in Internet of Things, and even in the space technologies are already cooperating. It's not maybe widely known, but there are Lithuanian students coming here to South Korea to study mostly STEM professions, technological professions, in your most prestigious universities. Sometimes they stay, sometimes they come back. This is a huge talent pool if they come back for us as well, because they learn how their business is done, how research is done in South Korea. And interestingly enough, there are quite a number of South Korean students actually studying in Lithuania medical sciences, mostly, for example, odontology. So it's really, the networks that young people create among themselves actually helps in the future to build either scientific research, other businesses. I do believe that we have to expand this kind of the cooperation, and definitely we are looking and working with the institutions. We, as I mentioned, we will be signing today the cooperation, a memorandum of understanding between Korea Bio and Lithuanian Innovation Agency on biotechnology. A couple of months ago, together with our Institute of Physical Research and Material Research, signed actually the MOU together with the Korean Laser Producing Institute. And there are many more to come, hopefully, for example, in the space industry, in between our trade institutions. So there are lots of options how to promote people-to-people contacts on different levels, business to business, students and institutions.
Well, it looks like there's a lot of synergy to unlock there, and we certainly look forward to that. Thank you so much for your time today, Vice Minister.
Thank you very much.
Flexing was a very popular spending term among millennials alongside YOLO, or you only live once. But now with inflation spiking, there's a new trend on the rise. Ji-young sheds light on this phenomenon.
With soaring inflation, many people find it hard to save much from their salary if they spend without thinking. But now there's a trend known as the No Spend Challenge. The idea is pretty simple. Cut back daily spending as much as possible. One office worker in her mid-20s says she's been doing the challenge for the last 8 months.
With no change in salary, I wasn't too sure if I could buy a house in the future. That's why I started this challenge. For starters, it is more sustainable to set small goals like doing the challenge for 3 days.
During one of the months, she cut her spending drastically, reducing her outgoings to 0 for 22 days. She was able to accomplish this by cutting down on her biggest expenses, eating out and ordering delivery food. When asked about why she's doing the challenge, she said she has a goal in mind.
My ultimate goal is to own a building so that money comes in without me having to work. I'm collecting the seed money for this goal.
Social media is filled with daily posts and hashtags by people like her sharing their tips and stories on zero spending. So I thought, why don't I give it a try? I also joined the No Spend Challenge so I could cut my outgoings as much as possible. Instead of taking a cab or bus, I left the house earlier this morning so I could walk to work. I usually take cabs on a rainy day, so by walking to work and walking back home, I was able to save around $6. And for lunch, rather than eating out, I ate it at Arirang's cafeteria and was able to save roughly $7 as well. I enjoy getting coffee from the local Starbucks, which costs me about $4, but I have switched to getting free coffee in the break room.
For dinner, I brought some home-cooked food from my parents' house so that I don't spend money on groceries or dining out.
In total, I can save around $24 a day if I continue this challenge. But an expert says, rather than excessively cutting down on all outgoings, it's better to spend on what you place a high value.
Recently, people are spending on what they put value on. Because the economy is not doing well with high inflation, people are trying to cut their outgoings generally. But that is too depressing, so they spend on things they can feel satisfied with.
Ji-young, Arirang News.
South Korean airlines are facing disruption due to China's military drills in waters surrounding Taiwan. Asiana Airlines has made the decision to change Thursday's flight schedule to Taiwan, with the morning outbound flight departing 3 hours earlier. This comes as China prepares to conduct a live-fire military exercise in the Taiwan region beginning Thursday afternoon in response to U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taipei. Korean Air has also rescheduled departure times for cargo planes for earlier in the day. Both airlines have cautioned that flights to Taiwan may be canceled entirely if the military drills continue as scheduled until Sunday. Meanwhile, Bloomberg reported Wednesday of rising concerns over global logistical disruption due to China's military exercise. Well,
for a look at news from around the world, we now turn to our Matthew Ashley standing by at the Arirang newsroom. Good morning to you, Matthew.
Good morning to you as well.
Let's start in France, as the country has just passed a relief package aimed at combating inflation.
That's right, Doyon. The bill in question was approved by France's parliament on Wednesday. The legislation increases pensions and some welfare payments by 4%. It also introduces a 3.5% cap on rent increases and keeps existing caps on gas and electricity prices. For French President Emmanuel Macron, this bill could help fulfill a promise made to boost household purchasing power amid soaring inflation. The French president had to work with rival parties to get it passed after he lost an absolute majority in parliament in June's legislative elections. The bill is now set to go through a final debate and vote in France's Senate later this week. Now, Kansas has voted to keep its current rights on access to abortion. In a Tuesday referendum, the conservative U.S. state saw over 60% of voters choose not to amend the state's constitution on abortion. The amendment would have given lawmakers in Kansas the ability to restrict or ban abortion. The referendum on it was the first such vote since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in June, which previously guaranteed American women their reproductive rights nationwide. With the final trickle of votes still being counted, the official result will be confirmed in a week. Airbus has axed an outstanding order from Qatar Airways amid a dispute over the condition of previously ordered planes. Industry sources say the scrapped order was for 19 Airbus A350 long-haul aircraft worth a total of around $3 billion. Now it comes amid a dispute over the condition of 20 previously ordered planes, which Qatar Airways claims are degrading prematurely. The planes reportedly had damage to anti-lightning mesh exposed by peeling paint. Airbus has said the issue is cosmetic, but Qatar Airlines says it could pose a risk to passengers and is suing Airbus for $1.4 billion after grounding half its fleet. And in our final story, a volcano in Iceland has erupted near the capital Reykjavik. According to Iceland's meteorological agency, on Wednesday, the Fagradalsfjall volcano erupted after days of earthquakes. It is spewing magma over a lava field created by last year's eruption. The eruption occurred just 15 kilometers from Iceland's international airport and 25 kilometers from the capital. The airport remains open, but the meteorological agency said that a code red has been declared to prevent airplanes from flying near the volcano.
Good morning. The heat gets stronger today, and except for the capital region, most parts of the country are under heat wave alerts. Daegu and surrounding regions will have highs in the upper 30s, with an expected high of 37 degrees Celsius in Daegu and surrounding regions. And soupy air will only make things more uncomfortable. Jeollado provinces and Jeju could see 5 to 60 millimeters of sudden rain. The rest of the country could receive 5 to 40 millimeters. While most regions had a tropical night with the thermometer staying above 25 degrees all night, afternoon highs will rise into the 30s even before lunchtime. So Seoul will be going up to 32 degrees Celsius, a couple of degrees higher than Wednesday. Gangneung in Gangwon province will top out at 35 degrees for a summer heat peak in most parts. While the capital region stays somewhat bearable, Daegu especially will have more sweltering conditions, hovering around 35 degrees Celsius for the next 5 days. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
That wraps up our newscast for this hour. We'll be back tomorrow for our Friday's edition of Nidae Arirang.
Thanks for joining us this morning, and do tune into Arirang News for updates throughout the day. Have a lovely day or evening wherever you are, and take care.